started saying a prayer, and then we all we sprinted away, and we ran away and then we met at the tennis courts, and then we couldn't find anyone. It was just me, Mia, and then my other cousin Bella, and then we were calling everyone. We didn't know what to do, and then we finally met up with them, and it was just so scary.
I'm sure. Mia?
I remember that we were like 15 feet away, and I thought like the shot was like a firecracker or something. It just didn't seem real. After that, we went like behind where Charlie Kirk was, and then we were meeting up at the tennis courts and trying to find everyone and get everyone together. And Charlie Kirk was such a good guy. I'm gonna miss him so much. I've always watched all of his videos, and
I can't imagine what you all went through.
America's gonna miss Charlie Kirk.
These individuals
There's 2 sides, but in this one, only one was ever told. On a cold April evening, the crowd gathered under bright rally lights, waiting to hear a voice that had become a movement. Charlie Kirk, outspoken, controversial, powerful. Moments later, that voice was silenced. News broke across the nation before the echoes even faded, and within hours, one name was everywhere: Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old drifter, alone, accused, and painted as the face of political violence. The evidence, they said, was undeniable. A weapon recovered nearby, text messages hinting at motive, a confession that never quite made sense. The case seemed sealed before it ever saw a courtroom. But truth, as history has shown, doesn't disappear. It hides, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it. Please make sure you comment while listening to this update. We will make sure we respond to everything. That's a proof that we are fighting for justice and what is right. Months later, when the cameras had turned away and the headlines grew quiet, a single eyewitness stepped forward. A woman who had been there that night, close enough to see panic unfold, close enough to remember what others forgot. Her story was different. Her version threatened to shatter the foundation of everything the investigation claimed to prove. She described details that were ignored, footage that vanished, and a suspect who might never have been at the scene at all. Now, as her testimony resurfaces, the world is asking again what really happened the night Charlie Kirk died. Was Tyler Robinson truly the man behind the gun, or was he caught inside a storm built by politics, pressure, and power? Evidence once thought clear is now clouded by doubt, and a trail once closed has reopened, revealing more questions than answers. In a case marked by secrecy and silence, an eyewitness has finally spoken. And tonight, we follow her words through every twist, every cover-up, and every truth that was buried to protect a narrative. Because behind the noise, behind the politics, behind the tragedy, there lies something far greater than guilt or innocence. There lies the truth, and it's time to face it. Before we dive into this story, remember, this is Detective Kate. True Crime, a channel that stands for justice and giving every case the attention it deserves. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our investigations. And don't forget, share your thoughts and theories below. Every clue counts. It began like any other rally, loud, electric, charged with anticipation. The April air in downtown Salt Lake City was crisp, carrying the sound of voices and music that rolled through the open square. Supporters packed shoulder to shoulder beneath bright stage lights, faces glowing beneath banners that read truth. Freedom, America first. Cameras flashed, cell phones streamed live feeds, and security teams scanned the perimeter as the crowd's roar swelled into a sea of motion and noise. Charlie Kirk had just arrived. He stepped onto the stage, confident, smiling, waving to the audience that had waited hours to see him. The energy was almost tangible, pulsing from the front row to the farthest edge of the plaza. The smell of street food lingered in the cool air. Chants rose, flags waved, microphones hummed with feedback. The night was alive. As Kirk began his speech, the first few minutes felt routine, the practiced rhythm of applause, laughter, and cheers. He leaned forward, voice echoing through the speakers, cutting through the noise. But beneath the surface of that familiar rhythm, something was off. A few attendees later recalled a man pacing near the north exit, his movements restless, deliberate. Others noticed flashes, not from cameras, but reflections of metal under the harsh floodlights. Just as Kirk raised his hand to emphasize a point, a sharp sound split the air. It wasn't immediately recognized as a gunshot, more like a microphone crack, a burst of static. Then came another noise, panic, a scream, then another. The crowd rippled with confusion as people ducked, shouted, and rushed toward exits. Chairs overturned, flags fell, and in the chaos, a single figure on stage stumbled backward. Security converged within seconds. Stage lights flickered. The live stream froze mid-frame. For a moment, there was silence, the kind that feels heavy, unnatural, as if the air itself stopped moving. Then came the sirens. Witnesses described the scene as unreal, like watching a headline unfold before their eyes. Some ran toward the stage, others away from it. Medics shouted for space, their voices swallowed by the wail of approaching ambulances. A woman cried out a name, though no one could tell whose. Police cordoned off the area, ordering everyone to the ground. Phones recorded fragments, none showing the shooter clearly, only shadows moving fast, and the terrified faces of those who didn't yet understand what had happened. Emergency responders had cleared the plaza. A helicopter hovered above. News stations broke into programming. And before the night was over, one narrative began to form. A suspect had been found nearby, alone, disoriented, and matching a vague description from the crowd. The arrest would happen quietly, just blocks away, while flashing lights still reflected off broken banners and spilled coffee cups. That night, a movement was shaken. A man was gone, and a name, Tyler Robinson, would soon dominate every screen in America. But even then, in the blur of panic and sirens, something didn't fit. Witnesses disagreed on what they saw, timelines overlapped, and security footage mysteriously cut out at the very moment it mattered most. The night of the crime was over, but the story of what really happened was only beginning. The day was bright, the kind that felt too ordinary to end in tragedy. The sun hung high over downtown Salt Lake City, flooding the open plaza in a hard white glare. Flags rippled against a light spring breeze, and the smell of food trucks and pavement dust mixed in the air. Rows of metal barriers framed the event space, where hundreds of supporters pressed forward, waiting for the start of Charlie Kirk's rally. It was early afternoon, and the city was alive with motion. Traffic humming in the distance, chants rising and falling like waves, the rhythmic thud of sound checks echoing off nearby buildings. Security teams walked the perimeter, radios crackling faintly. Volunteers handed out leaflets, bottled water, and small flags, while media crews adjusted tripods beneath the glare of the sun. At 1:36 p.m., Charlie Kirk appeared at the edge of the stage, greeted by a roar of applause that seemed to shake the ground. Cameras snapped, phones went up. His voice carried easily through the speakers, confident and clear, rising above the restless hum of the crowd. For nearly 10 minutes, everything felt predictable, rehearsed even, the sound of cheers, laughter, and the sharp pop of microphones cutting through the dry afternoon air. But beneath that surface of order, small irregularities began to take shape. Witnesses would later recall seeing a man near the north barricade, restless, pacing, moving against the crowd's rhythm. Another remembered spotting a flash of reflection from something metallic near the media pit. None of it seemed urgent at the time. Nothing ever does until it's too late. At 1:42 p.m., just as Kirk paused mid-sentence, shading his eyes from the glare, a single deafening sound tore through the air, sudden, sharp, and unmistakable. The echo bounced between concrete walls, turning the plaza into a chamber of confusion. For a fraction of a second, no one moved. Then came the screams. Panic spread like fire. People dropped to the ground. Others stumbled over chairs and banners. The orderly rows dissolved into chaos. Flags trampled, signs broken, shouts mixing with the shrill wail of alarms. Security sprinted toward the stage. Medics shouted for clear space. In the crowd, phones kept recording, trembling hands capturing fragments of disbelief, flashes of sunlight, frightened faces, the sound of sirens growing louder with each passing second. Kirk lay on the stage as aides and guards surrounded him. The scene was blinding. Sunlight reflecting off metal railings, dust rising in thick clouds. Police arrived within minutes, cordoning off the area, ushering hundreds out through side streets, now clogged with emergency vehicles. By 1:47 p.m., the plaza was nearly empty, except for investigators and first responders. The stage lights had been shut off, replaced by the pulsing red and blue of patrol cars. Witnesses were lined up, shaken, recounting fractured details. Someone seen running, a backpack dropped near a barricade, a young man leaving the crowd too quickly. At 2 p.m., a radio call went out. A suspect had been detained 3 blocks away. His name, Tyler Robinson. The arrest was quiet, almost procedural, as if the conclusion had already been written. That day, under the brightness of the sun, a tragedy unfolded in plain view. Yet even with hundreds of eyes and dozens of cameras, the truth was lost in seconds of chaos. The footage would later glitch, witness accounts would clash, and the timeline, when reconstructed, would leave one haunting gap, a few moments of blinding daylight, when no one could say, with certainty, what they truly saw. The day of the crime was over, but what it revealed, and what it concealed, was only beginning to surface. The investigation began before the dust had even settled. Within minutes of the shooting, law enforcement swarmed the plaza, state police, federal agents, and local officers, each trying to impose order on a scene that had become a blur of panic and disbelief. Yellow tape stretched across the walkways. Photographers were pushed back. Witnesses were corralled into neat lines that did nothing to calm their shaking hands. Detectives moved with speed, almost urgency, as though they already knew where to look. Officers marked shell casings with bright orange cones. Cameras clicked. A trail of footprints was photographed near the stage stairs. Every sound, the distant drone of helicopters, the whirring of generators, the muffled cries from the crowd, added to the heavy, unreal atmosphere of the afternoon. By 2:10 p.m., radio chatter confirmed what headlines would soon repeat. A suspect was in custody. Tyler Robinson, 22 years old, unemployed, known to drift between cities. According to reports, he had been found 3 blocks from the plaza, sitting alone on a bus stop bench, staring blankly at the ground. In his backpack, police claimed, was a handgun that matched the caliber of the bullet recovered from the scene. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. Witnesses described him as calm, even dazed, as if he'd wandered into a nightmare he didn't understand. Within the hour, his photos circulated online, a grainy mugshot under bold headlines that read "Suspect Arrested in Kirk Shooting." At the command center downtown, investigators began piecing together the fragments. They cross-referenced phone data, CCTV footage, and eyewitness statements. But already, inconsistencies began to appear. Timestamps didn't align. Camera angles cut off at critical moments. Some recordings showed Robinson near the rally minutes before the incident. Others placed him on the opposite end of the plaza. None of it formed a clean narrative. Still, the pressure to produce answers was enormous. News trucks surrounded the police headquarters. Reporters shouted questions that no one would answer. Public officials called for calm, while privately demanding closure. Within hours, the official story began to take shape. A lone man, politically motivated, acting out of anger and ideology. That evening, the police chief stood before a wall of microphones, his tone measured but firm. He spoke of overwhelming evidence and swift justice. Behind him, investigators nodded silently. But what the cameras didn't show was the uncertainty still lingering inside the department. The quiet doubt of detectives who had reviewed the surveillance footage frame by frame and found gaps that couldn't be explained. Inside the interrogation room, Tyler Robinson remained expressionless. Officers described him as distant, confused, uncooperative. He offered no confession, no denial, only fragments of memory that made little sense. He claimed he'd been near the north exit, not the stage. He said he heard the gunshot, but didn't see where it came from. He said he ran because everyone else did. Still, the case moved forward at lightning speed. The weapon was logged, the suspect charged, and the district attorney released a statement calling it an open and shut act of violence. The narrative was clean, controlled, and ready for the evening news. But as the investigation continued, details began to fray. One officer quietly questioned why the fingerprints on the weapon were partial. Another wondered how Robinson could have moved from the north exit to the stage area in seconds. A third noted that the video feed from the primary event camera, the one pointed directly at Kirk, was missing 7 crucial seconds. 7 seconds that could have changed everything. By sunset, the city was blanketed in speculation. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse. Hashtags surged online, some calling for justice, others claiming a setup. And in the middle of it all stood one unanswered question. If Tyler Robinson didn't do it, then who did? The investigation was supposed to bring clarity. Instead, it opened the door to the most controversial chapter of the case, the one that would soon challenge everything the public thought it knew. Days after the arrest, the case against Tyler Robinson appeared airtight. On paper, the headlines declared it solved, the public moved toward outrage, and prosecutors promised justice. But inside the investigation, quiet doubts began to grow. Detectives reviewing the evidence noticed small but troubling inconsistencies. The ballistic report showed a match, yet the fingerprints on the weapon were incomplete, smudged, partial, and inconclusive. Surveillance footage that was supposed to capture the exact moment of the shooting contained a sudden 7-second blackout. When questioned, technicians called it a technical glitch. Witness statements only deepened the confusion. Some swore they saw Robinson near the main stage seconds before the shot. Others placed him by the north barricade, nearly 200 feet away. The timestamps on photos and videos didn't align, creating a gap, a silent stretch of missing truth. Behind closed doors, officers debated whether the arrest had been too fast. One detective reportedly said, "It feels like we skipped steps just to have someone to blame." Still, the official narrative moved forward unchanged. As pressure mounted, evidence that didn't fit the timeline was quietly filed away, and witnesses whose accounts contradicted the report stopped receiving calls from investigators. What was once presented as a clear-cut case now looked fractured, rushed, uncertain, and perhaps deliberately shaped.